If you're looking for some cheap Karlov Manor decks that are ideal for the Midweek Magic constructed event, then I've got 4 decks here that are only using Karlov Manor cards and don't use any rares at all. So we're going to break down these decks and go through how you can win games with them. Welcome back to the channel. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already, because we are going to break down these 4 different budget decks for the Midweek Magic Karlov Manor constructed event. Now you might want to take part in this event because you can get 2 rare individual card rewards, or at least some gems if you have a bigger collection. And all it's going to cost you is just a few wild cards. So I'm going to break down how to win with these decks, how many wild cards you need, and we'll see which one is your favorite. Let me know in the comments below which one you think is going to do the best. And the first deck is the Slime Against Humanity deck. Now, because Slime Against Humanity is one of those cards that say a deck can have any number of cards named Slime Against Humanity, and I've got 18 in this deck at the moment. Because 4 is the most you normally can have of any card, then you only need 4 wild cards, and it will let you use an infinite amount of Slime Against Humanity. You can put as many of those into your deck as you want, and it only costs 4 common wild cards. So this deck in total is only using 22 common wild cards and 4 uncommons. So this is the cheapest one by far. You can make it a lot cheaper by only using Slime Against Humanity. You could just use 4 common wild cards and put the rest forests in the deck, and you might win some games, possibly. But hopefully, this version of a deck will win some more games because it makes the Slime Against Humanity card even better. So, to break it down how it works, you play this sorcery for 3 mana and it makes a 0/0 ooze and then puts 2+1 counters on it. The next time you cast one, it puts 3+1 counters on the next creature. The next time, it makes 4+1 counters. They get bigger and bigger, and they've got trample. That's really good. But you get the +1 counters equal to the number of cards in your graveyard, sorceries in your graveyard, named Slime Against Humanity, and also any that are exiled. So if we can get more of these cards into the graveyard, then we're going to be able to cast bigger slimes earlier. So in order to do that, we want to do 2 things, and that is Surveil and Mill. So first of all, we have the Gnarling Gorehound, a 1 mana, 1/1 menace creature. Whenever another creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you surveil 1. So the Gorehounds have less than 2 power. Our other creatures all have less than 2 power, and even the slimes enter as a 0/0 creature with +1 counters going onto it. So technically that does also trigger the surveil with the Gorehound. So every time we see a slime card, when we surveil, we put that in the graveyard, it's going to make the other slimes that we cast bigger. We've also got the Rubble Belt Maverick, 1 mana, 1/1. When it enters, you surveil 2, and you can also exile it from the graveyard to put +1 counter on something. That's something you can do with extra mana. It's not important for the deck, but an extra +1 counter might make a slight difference. And then we also have the Aftermath Analyst. When it enters, it mills 3 cards. Hopefully, some of those cards will be slime cards. And if we get too many lands in our graveyard, then we can, if we want to, pay 4 to sacrifice the Analyst and return land cards from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped. And we also have Escape Tunnels, so they're kind of the Evolving Wilds of the set. You can sacrifice these to find other basic lands you want, so it's just useful to have in a 2-color deck when we don't have other rare lands, so we don't get stuck on the wrong colors. Also, if we have that in the graveyard, the Aftermath Analyst can bring it back, and it can thin the deck out a little bit more. The only other cards we have are to help us stay alive and hopefully remove some of the opponent's things. We've got Toxin Analysis, 1 mana, black instant. Target creature gains Death Touch and Lifelink till end of turn, and we investigate. Now, if we have a big slime, then giving it Lifelink is going to keep us alive longer. If we're attacking with trample creatures, and say we're attacking with a 10/10 slime, and the opponent blocks with a 10/10 creature, then we can put Death Touch onto the slime, and it will do 1 damage to the opponent's blocking creature, and the rest of the damage will go through to their life points. So Trample kind of makes it like it's unblockable or not blocked, because you'll get lots of damage going through. So Toxin Analysis covers both of those things, and also we get to investigate. And sometimes with this deck, we're stuck with land that we don't get to use. So that extra 2 mana to draw a card also helps. And then we just have Bite Down on Crime. It's a 4 mana bite spell. It can give a creature +2 and then do damage equal to its power to another creature. We can collect Evidence 6, which is exiling up to 6 mana's worth of cards from the graveyard to make this cost only 2. 2 mana instead of 4 mana. It doesn't necessarily come up too much, but we can make it cheaper if we want to. And that's literally all the cards in the deck. We're just going to keep making slimes, and if the opponent doesn't have a board wipe, then to be honest, we're going to be casting like 7/7 trample, 8/8 trample slimes pretty quickly, and yeah, we're going to do lots of damage with those. So it's the cheapest of all the decks. You can make this just to get through the event if you want to. But we have 3 other decks to go through as well, so we're going to go through the next one now. The next deck we're going to look at is an Artisan Gruul weapons-based deck. Now this one does use more wildcards. It's 12 common wildcards and 32 uncommons. But if you have any of these cards from jump-in events or draft events, obviously it's not going to take you quite so many. And to be honest, even trading that many commons and uncommons to potentially 2 other rare cards or just some gems is not a bad exchange rate if you have the extra wild cards laying around, and commons and uncommons build up pretty quickly. So, how does this deck work? The combo this deck is hoping to achieve is to make creatures that are unblockable and really big. So, first of all, we want to use Rope. Now, this is a really important one. It makes a creature have the ability can't be blocked by more than one creature. So it can only be blocked by one. But if we can make that suspected, if we can make it have menace in some way, then it can't be blocked by only one creature, and so it can't be blocked. Can't be blocked by one, can't be blocked by more than one. So we just want big creatures that have a rope attached and are the suspect or suspected. So a convenient target is an enchantment that can make something suspected, but we have other ways as well. We've also got Knife, which will give a creature +1 and first strike. So it makes it really awkward to try to block giant creatures with first strike and giant creatures that can only be blocked by one creature, even if we don't have the suspected. We've also got Torch the Witness, do damage to opponents' creatures to help keep them out of the way. We've got Concealed Weapon. Now, this is another thing that the deck has quite a lot of, is disguise cards, because we want to be able to disguise some of our big creatures. Now, Concealed Weapon, it's a 2 mana artifact equipment, can give a creature +3/+0, and when it's turned up, you can attach it to a creature you control. Now, you can turn it up using the disguise cost at instant speed. So this is basically a combat trick that hangs around, but you can just use this as an extra 3 mana 2/2 ward 2 creature if you want to just have extra creatures out. And we've got, let's go to the other disguise cards. We've got Bolrak Clan Basher, a 6 mana 3/2 double strike trample creature. Has a disguise cost of 5, so you can pay 3 to make it a 2/2 ward 2 creature, and then you can pay the 5 at instant speed to flip it over to a 3/2 double strike trample. So that's doing 6 damage. Now, if we can attach some other equipment to it, if we attach a concealed weapon, that's going to be 6 more damage on the Bolrak and Basher. So we can do lots of damage with that. Trample, double strike means it's really, really awkward to try to block it. We also have the Rift Burst Helion, which is a 7 mana 6/7 reach creature that also has a disguise cost of 6. Now, the disguise costs for these two are quite big, 5 or 6. You can pay 3 to disguise it. Might have to wait to have 6 to actually flip it over. But there's something else we can do to make this much cheaper, and that's use the card Expose the Culprit. It's a 2 mana instant, and we can choose one or both of these. We can turn a target face down creature face up. So for 2 mana, we can turn over the Rift Burst Helion or the Basher. We can turn them over instant speed for just 2 mana. We can also, if we want, exile the face-up creatures we control with a disguise cost in them, put them in a face-down pile, shuffle them around, and then cloak them. So basically they flip over and they flip back. We've also got some lands that can disguise as well. So I thought I'd put these in there as well, because it's nice to have more creatures if you need them. If you don't need that many lands, it's good to have that as a backup. We have the escape tunnel again to look for different color basics if we need it. And the last one is the Rubble Belt Braggart, which is a 5-mana 5/5. Whenever it attacks, if it's not suspected, you may suspect it. So basically, it's just a 5/5 menace. So if we can get a rope on the Braggart, then it can't be blocked by anything, and it's going to be a 6/7 unblockable creature. We can attach other things to it to make it even bigger. So that's how the Gruul weapons deck works. Let me know what you think of this one in the comments, and if you do try it out, it costs a few more uncommon wildcards, but I think it's a pretty nice combo to put together. Deck we want to look at is the Artisan Detectives deck. This is Azorius Detectives, and this one uses 14 common wild cards and 26 uncommon. So it's big as the Gruul weapons deck, but it's not quite as cheap as the Slimes deck, so it's kind of in the middle. And what we're doing here is trying to make as many detective creatures as we can and follow the synergies that those detective creatures can make happen. So the creatures we have: Novice Inspector, 1-mana 1/2 detective that creates a clue token when it enters. We've also got the Perimeter Enforcer, a 2-mana 1/1 flying lifelink creature. Whenever another detective enters, or whenever a detective is turned face up, this gets an extra +1/+1 till end of turn. So a little bit of lifelink on an evasive creature that's pretty much going to be a 2/2 a lot of the time. We've also got the Case File Auditor, a 3-mana 1/4 detective. When it enters the battlefield, and whenever you solve a case, you look at the top 6 cards of your library and you may reveal an enchantment card from among them and put them into your hand. It also says that you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast case spells. This is going to help us find cases, which are a type of enchantment, and other enchantments as well. Keep drawing some cards. So it should be able to keep our hand pretty full with that and the investigate with the clue tokens we make. We've also got the Private Eye, which I love the artwork for this. Private Eye is a 3-mana 3/3 detective. Other detectives get +1/+1, so it's going to give a boost to like the Perimeter Enforcer and keep gaining us life. And whenever we draw a second card each turn, a target detective, can't be blocked this turn. So whichever detective we want to get that damage through with the most, might be the Private Eye itself, might be something like the Perimeter Enforcer, might actually even be the Granite Witness, because it's the one with the biggest damage. It's a 3/2 flying vigilant creature, which also has disguise like the red and green deck from before. When it's turned face up, you may tap or untap a target creature. So not bad for creating a blocker when we need it, but also pretty good for removing one of the opponent's blockers and getting some damage through. We've also got some other cards to support this. So we've got the Case of the Filched Falcon, a 1-mana enchantment, a 1-mana case. It investigates, creates that clue token. If we control 3 or more artifacts, then we can solve this case and we can sacrifice it for 3 mana to turn a clue token, or if we had any other non-creature artifact, into a 4/4 flying bird. It's not a detective, unfortunately, so it doesn't benefit from other detective synergies, but it's nice getting a 4/4 evasive creature. All we have to pay is the 1 to get this out, and 3 whenever we want to get that 4/4 flying creature. So actually it's a pretty low cost for what you get. We've also got Curious Inquiry, another enchantment, to work with the Case File Auditor searching for enchantments, to give another creature +1/+1, and whenever it deals damage to a player, to investigate. So we're going to keep making those clue tokens and drawing cards. We have the Case of the Pilfered Proof, a 2-mana case. Whenever a detective enters the battlefield under our control, and whenever a detective we control is turned face up, the +1/+1 counter on it. All our detectives are getting stronger with this. We solve the case if we control 3 or more detectives, which isn't too difficult in this deck. And if we solved it, if 1 or more tokens would be created under our control, we create those tokens and an extra clue token are created instead. So if we're hitting with the Curious Inquiry, we're investigating, we're making an extra one. If a Novice Inspector comes out, we're making an extra clue token. So it's going to make loads of artifacts, loads of clues, and we're going to keep being able to draw cards. We've also got Burden of Proof. It's a 2-mana flash enchantment. The enchanted creature gets +2/+2 as long as it's a detective that we control. Otherwise, it turns an opponent's creature into a 1/1 creature that cannot block detectives. So it works well either way, offensively or defensively. And then we've also got Makeshift Binding, kind of a borrowed time type of effect. It's a 3-mana enchantment. When it enters, you exile a creature an opponent controls, and you also gain 2 life at the same time. So we're going to put all these detectives out. They're going to boost each other. We're going to make lots of artifacts, lots of clue tokens, keep drawing cards, keep finding our enchantments to remove the opponent's things, and hopefully we're going to finish off with some evasive creatures, some lifelink to keep us going. So that's the detectives deck. Let me know what you think of this one in the comments below, and let's move on to the last one. Okay, so this might actually be my favorite one out of all of those, although the slimes is pretty funny. This is the Artisan Izzet Artifacts or Artifacts Sacrifice deck. As for wild cards, this deck uses 14 commons and 30 uncommons to put this together based on creating artifacts and sacrificing artifacts. So our main creatures in the deck would be Gleaming Geardrakes, a 2-mana 1/1 flying creature. It's an artifact in itself. That becomes relevant. And when it enters, you investigate, make that clue token. Whenever you sacrifice an artifact, you put a +1/+1 counter on the Geardrake, so it's going to keep getting bigger. We also have the Crime Novelist, which is kind of similar. 3-mana, 1/3 Goblin. Whenever you sacrifice an artifact, you put a +1/+1 counter on the Crime Novelist, and you also gain 1 red mana. So we want to be able to make those artifacts as quickly as possible and sacrifice them as quickly as possible. There's another combo in the deck that works really well, which is the Harried Dronesmith, a 4-mana 2/3 creature. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you create a 1/1 Thopter artifact token with flying. It gains haste, so you can attack and do that 1 damage. And you sacrifice it at the beginning of your next end step, so they don't stay around. We're sacrificing Thopters, which means the Crime Novelist and the Geardrake are getting their counters. But we also have the Detective's Satchel. It's a 4-mana artifact. When it enters, you investigate twice, so we're making more artifacts to sacrifice. And we can tap the Satchel to create a 1/1 colorless Thopter token only if we've sacrificed an artifact this turn. So if we have a Dronesmith that's making Thopters, they sacrifice, add +1 counters over here, and then we can tap this and make another Thopter that stays around. So we're basically just churning out loads and loads of creatures, loads of Thopters and clue tokens. And when we sacrifice those, the fact that Crime Novelist gives you the extra red mana means if we sacrifice a clue token, costs us 2, but we get 1 back. So effectively, we've only spent 1 mana to draw a card and put a +1 counter on any creatures that are out that benefit from that effect. And if we have 2 Crime Novelists, then we're basically packing those clue tokens for free, because every time we pay 2, sacrifice a clue, we get 2 red mana back. So there's some really nice synergies with that. But in order to keep us going and get to the combos and the synergies that we want to, we have, again, the case of the Filched Falcon. I like this card. We investigate, make that clue token. We have to control at least 3 or more artifacts, which is pretty easy. And then we can make that 4/4 flying bird creature. We have Convenient Target, which we had in the red and green deck, actually. Makes creatures suspected, which gives them an extra +1. But the suspected means it has menace and it can't block. This card also has the ability of paying 3 mana to return it from your graveyard to your hand. And there are sometimes it might end up in our graveyard. We've got Shock, which is 2 damage to any target. Nice and cheap. Pretty good for those disguise cards that your opponent might have. It's not uncounterable, but because it only costs 1 mana, you can kill those disguised creatures just for 3 mana, which isn't too bad. And we also have Torch the Witness again, which we've had in the other deck. But if we do excess damage, we get to investigate, so we're making another clue token. We have Demand Answers, which is discarding a card or sacrificing an artifact to draw 2 cards. So we can discard something like a Convenient Target, because we can bring that back anyway. Or we can sacrifice an artifact, possibly a Thopter that's going to be sacrificed anyway, to draw 2 more cards for just 2 mana, which is pretty nice. And we also have Galvanize, a 2-mana instant that does 3 damage to a target creature. If you've drawn 2 or more cards this turn, it does 5 damage to that creature instead. And because we have so many ways of making clue tokens, it's not actually that difficult for us to draw 2 or more cards in a turn. So 2 mana for 5 damage to a creature is a pretty good rate. We've also got the escape tunnels again, just to help us with the fact that we're working with 2 different colours here. And we also have Scene of the Crime. This is a land, but it's also an artifact. It's also a clue. It enters tapped. You can tap it for colourless. You can tap an untapped creature we control to add mana of any colour. Obviously, we have lots of creatures. We can make Thopters. So we're going to have creatures that we can tap for mana of any colour. So it's going to help us in that way as well. And we can also pay 2 to sacrifice this and draw a card, just like you can with any other clue token. And it will obviously help the Gear Drake, and it will help the crime novelist as well. And the Scene of the Crime also counts towards, having enough artifacts for Case of the Filched Falcon to work as well. So we're going to make some creatures. We're going to keep drawing cards. We're going to kill the opponent's creatures and just make ours bigger and bigger and stop the opponent from being able to do too much about it. Or we're just going to make loads and loads of Thopters with the Satchel. So that's the Izzet Artifact deck. Let me know what you think of that one in the comments below. And that's it. That's our 4 budget decks for this Midweek Magic event. So one thing I should probably say about the event is that if you don't do it, it's not the biggest thing in the world. It's not the biggest problem in the world. You're going to lose like 2 rare cards at the most. But considering we can spend some common and uncommon wild cards on making a deck, playing a different format, trying it out and getting some rare cards for free just for entering the event, I think it's not a bad deal. So if you have the wild cards to craft any one of these decks, or maybe you've done some jump-in events and you have a deck from a jump-in event or from a draft event that you've done as well, just use whatever you have to complete the event and you're going to get yourself those 2 rare cards. I wouldn't recommend crafting any rare cards for the sake of that event only, because the rare wild cards are worth more than the rare ICRs that you get from the event, unless it's a rare card you're going to use lots, like War Leader's Call, which seems to be doing pretty well right now, or anything else that you think you're going to get long-term value out of and that you would probably craft anyway. Otherwise, it's a waste of a wild card. So I'll put the deck list for these 4 decks in the description below, so you can just copy it easily if that's what you'd like to do. And if you do use one of these and it works out well for you, let me know in the comments below, because it's always good to know when these deck lists have helped you out. So thanks for watching this video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.